Let's turn now to the best-selling author and radio host, Deepak Chopra, who knew Michael Jackson for 20 years and has been good enough to spend some of this evening with us tonight. Thank you for your time, sir.
Yes, you're welcome.
You heard from Mr. Jackson relatively recently, is that correct?
Yeah, I spoke to him a few times in the last 3 weeks, and then 2 days before he died, he left a message on my voicemail saying he had good news to share and would I call him back. I picked up the message a day later. When I called him back, the phone number wasn't valid anymore, and I didn't really panic about that because he used to frequently change his phone numbers.
Can you describe how did he sound relative to your long experience with him? Was there much change indicated or none?
In the last few weeks, he sounded really good. He was very excited about the concert. He was especially excited about a particular song that he was wanting to write. He had created the music. He had sent the music to me. We were discussing the lyrics of the music. So he was in a good mood. He was in a really good mood. I said, Michael, you're coming back. He said, for sure, this time I'm coming back.
What do you make then, especially in the context of his hopefulness at the end, of these reports of possible abuse of prescription drugs and people trying to intervene to stop this, and a live-in doctor, which you probably heard the LA Times reporter say had been brought in by the promoter of this concert?
Well, you know, in 2005, Michael came to spend a week with me in San Diego after his trial was over, and he asked me for a prescription for narcotics, for Oxycontin actually, and I was quite shocked. And then I started to quiz him a little bit, and it became obvious to me that he was taking these substances and they were being prescribed by various physicians. When I started to really probe, he became very defensive, and he started to deny that he had a problem. He said he was in a lot of pain. I know that Michael has been in a lot of psychological and emotional pain over the years, so I said to him there were ways to deal with that pain, and he started to avoid me for a while. And this happened intermittently through the years, that whenever I brought up this problem, he would then stop calling me, and then 2-3 weeks later he'd call me and say he was sorry, but there wasn't a problem. When he had a pain, he would get somebody to prescribe either Demerol or give him something orally like Oxycontin. So I was very aware that he had a problem. I was in constant conversation with the nanny of his children, who actually I had introduced to Michael when she was 18, which is almost 18 years ago, and she would call me when she thought he was kind of over the edge or his behavior was erratic, and she felt that it was maybe a result of the drugs. But we were never able to get to the point where we could have a real intervention. I love Michael. He was like a brother to me. I have a lot of anger right now at the enabling doctors that perpetuate this. There's a tradition, there's a culture of this in Hollywood, and you know, I think it's about time we did a real investigation into this culture of legalized drug pushers. That's what they are.
You mentioned the prospect of intervention, or the hope for intervention. Do you think you had, and not to try to assign any of the blame for this to you, but did you have a full handle on how bad this situation may have been, that might have ended in the kind of outcome that presented itself evidently yesterday?
There are occasions when I felt that, you know, we needed to really have an intervention, and that's when we couldn't find him, or when he would, you know, Michael was very good at finding the right doctors who could give him drugs and avoiding the doctors who did not want to participate in that. Michael was also very good at isolating himself when he wanted to and being unreachable when he wanted to. He would frequently change his numbers. He was a very damaged, abused child as well, and you know, a lot of his behavior can be traced to his childhood. And you know, now there are studies that show, there's a paper in Psychosomatic Medicine, that children who've been either physically or verbally abused will go on to develop autoimmune diseases like lupus and vitiligo, both of which he had. He was quite disfigured, so he would, you know, avoid being seen, at least his body, and therefore he would cover himself, and then that would lead to people making all kinds of fun fun of him and calling him all kinds of things. He would feel the cruelty of that. He didn't understand that. And then he would become obsessed with plastic surgery, which is also a sign of shame and humiliation and self-loathing, which happens in children who've been abused. And there was no way people who knew the context of his behavior would have had a much more compassionate understanding of why he did the things that he did.
Deepak Chopra, I did 4 hours worth of interviews on the subject of Michael Jackson's life and death last night, and I've done many in the past. I don't think I've ever heard more insight and more tenderly expressed. I'm sorry that you've lost your friend, and I thank you for being as open with us as you have been tonight.
Thank you, Keith. He was my brother. Thank you.
Our condolences, sir. Goodness.